We're going back to the end of Genesis, the beginning of Exodus. If I haven't said this before, the reason why we're not going to page 1 of Genesis is because most Catholic scripture scholars believe that it is the book of Exodus that is written first. Okay, Genesis will come later. So we're going to work our way through Exodus to see how that story unfolds, and then we'll go back to Genesis because that's the order they were probably written. Okay? So we'll see some little signs and signals about what's happening to the 12 tribes in the midst of this. Now, just because the experience of the people of Abraham has not been recorded yet, it doesn't mean they don't have an identity, right? When we read the very last part of Genesis, it was about the death of Jacob, the death of Joseph. Remember, I said he's the only Jewish mummy that we know of because he's prepared by the Egyptians. They mummified people. But remember what he tells his brothers at his death. David, you're nodding your head. What does he tell them?
Take my bones back to...
Someday, when you leave this place, take me with you, basically. Take my bones with you. Okay? Because again, we're going to see that theme again and again through the Hebrew scriptures, especially Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. Okay? And for them, home is the promised land. The place that we would call Israel in the Middle East. Palestine, depending upon your perspective of history and so forth. So Joseph's brothers and their tribes are in Egypt, and that's where it picks up now, the book of Exodus. Someone said this to me, and I don't remember who it was, to be honest with you, after our last session. If you're not familiar with the Bible, I need to be a little more clear about things. So the books of the Bible have a name, in this case the book of Exodus. They're broken up into chapters, and then those chapters are broken up into verses. So when we're reading straight through, it's not a problem, but sometimes I might just reference and say Exodus 12, verse 7. And so you have to find your way to that book, that chapter, that verse, okay? So if that's new to you, if that's strange to you, we'll get used to working it. So this is very easy because it's the book of Exodus, chapter 1, verse 1. We're starting right at the very beginning. These are the names of the sons of Israel who, accompanied by their households, migrated with Jacob into Egypt. Okay, so it's taking us back in time already. It's saying these are the children of Israel who went with Jacob, the father and grandfather, if you will, to Egypt. Okay? Reuben, Simeon, Levi, not the creator of blue jeans, by the way, and Judah. Issachar, Zebulun, and Benjamin, Dan and Naphtali, Gad and Asher. Who's missing? Joseph. Why? Because he's already there. Okay? So it restates everybody that went to Egypt. The total number of the direct descendants of Jacob was 70. Joseph was already in Egypt. There it is. It's stating it for us. Now Joseph and all his brothers and that whole generation died. It's important that you know that a generation from the Jewish perspective of life and history is 40 years. Not 4, but 40. Okay, that's considered a generation. So, they have all died off. The Israelites were fruitful and prolific. They became so numerous and strong that the land was filled with them. In other words, Egypt has a lot of descendants of Jacob going on here. Okay? They had big families, and they have lots of kids. And so they start to become a very significant part of the population. The story will continue. Then a new king who knew nothing of Joseph. So it's got to be some amount of time that has passed, right? A new pharaoh, a new king comes to power in Egypt. He knows nothing of Joseph, that whole story. He came to power in Egypt. He said to his subjects, "Look how numerous and powerful the Israelite people are growing, more so than we ourselves. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them to stop their increase. Otherwise, in a time of war, they too may join our enemies to fight against us, and so leave our country." So what is the Pharaoh saying? What's his worry? There's not just that there's too many. What? Sharon? If we have a war, we might end up with a war on our border and a rebellion in the country. And that's pretty hard to survive. So the Pharaoh says, and I'm using the term Pharaoh because that's the Egyptian term for king, obviously. The Pharaoh says, we got to do something about this. There's too many. There's too many of them. Accordingly, taskmasters were set over the Israelites to oppress them with forced labor. We would call that slavery. Okay? Thus they had to build for Pharaoh the supply cities of Pithom and Ramses. Yet the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. Man, they're like rabbits, these Egyptians. The Egyptians then dreaded the Israelites and reduced them to cruel slavery, making life bitter for them with hard work at mortar and brick and all kinds of field work. The whole cruel fate of slaves. Okay? Now this is a minor point, but I told you, you're going to get accustomed as we work through this. Every word is important. Okay? Have any of you ever been to a Seder meal, the Passover meal?
Yes.
For those of you who have, what is part of that meal? Do you remember some of the main elements?
Bitters. Salt.
Okay, David said it too. Bitter herbs. Okay? Why? It goes right there. Okay? Making life bitter for them with hard work in mortar and brick and all kinds of field. In other words, those bitter herbs, even to this day, when a Jewish family sits down to Passover, the reason why those bitter herbs are part of that meal is to remind them of the bitterness that our ancestors had when they had to work in Egypt. So that word is very important in terms of this whole story. The king of Egypt, again, Pharaoh, told the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was called Shiphrah and the other Puah, "When you act as midwives for the Hebrew women and see them giving birth, if it is a boy, kill him. But if it is a girl, she may live." The midwives, however, feared God. They did not do as the king of Egypt had ordered them, but let the boys live also. What's the idea of killing the boys? Number one, it takes out part of the population, and number two, it's the boys that are growing to men that could turn against you. Okay, but the midwives go, and they just do their own thing. Okay, God bless the women; they're always in there. So the king summoned the midwives and asked them, "Why have you acted thus, allowing the Hebrew boys to live?" The midwives answered Pharaoh, "The Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women. They are robust and give birth before the midwife even arrives. Therefore, God dealt well with the midwives. The people too increased and grew strong. And because the midwives feared God, God built up families for them. Pharaoh then commanded all his subjects, 'Throw into the river every boy that is born to the Hebrews, but you may let the girls live.'" So the Pharaoh has to get more cruel about this than just trusting the midwives, because he learns he can't trust the midwives, basically. But I love that. Like, hey, our women aren't like your women. They give birth without us. Okay? Not like those dainty Egyptian women. Here it goes, chapter 2. Now a certain man of the house of Levi married a Levite woman who conceived and bore a son. Why is it important that the Levites are involved here? What do you remember about the Levites?
They're the only ones that become priests.
They are the priestly class. They are the priestly clan, if you will. Okay, so Moses is going to come from the priestly clan, if you will, the priestly tribe. Now a certain man of the house of Levi married a Levite woman, so both sides come from Levi, who conceived and bore a son. Seeing that he was a goodly child, she hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no more, why can't you hide a baby that's 3 months old? Because they cry, and they want to move, and they want to get going. Okay? When she could hide him no more longer, she took a papyrus basket, daubed it with bitumen and pitch, and putting the child in it, placed it among the reeds on the riverbank. So she takes a papyrus, a reed basket, just like what, remember Father Jose showed us the reeds that go both ways to make the papyrus to print on, but they also wove them into baskets. Why does she dip it in bitumen and pitch? What's that about? She's sealing it. We would say tar. She dipped it in tar. Okay? So she puts little Moses in it and hides him among the reeds on the riverbank. You know this story probably. His sister stationed herself at a distance to find out what would happen to him. Okay, so his older sister is like watching to see what happens to her baby brother here. Pharaoh's daughter came down to the river to bathe, while her maids walked along the riverbank. Noticing the basket among the reeds, she sent her handmaid to fetch it. On opening the basket, she looked, and lo, there was a baby boy crying. She was moved to pity for him and said, "It is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister, right? So the baby's sister is watching. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call one of the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" "Yes, do so," the princess answered. So the maiden went and called the child's own mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Please take this child and nurse it for me, and I will repay you." The woman therefore took the child and nursed it. When the child grew, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her son and called him Moses. For she said, "I drew him out of the water." Pretty cool story, huh? Everything starts out crazy and everything ends up just fine. Who gets to raise this kid? His own mother. Who gets credit for that? His sister. So lots of interesting intrigue here right from the get-go. So again, just picture this though, because you can't miss the forest through the trees. You have a time when the Israelite people are being oppressed, even held in slavery. The king is worried about how fruitful, how much they multiply, how many kids there are. The king is afraid they're going to overtake the land. But this one particular kid is not only saved, but ends up where? As part of Pharaoh's family. That's why people have said for many generations, God writes straight with crooked lines. If you've never heard that, that's a great line. God writes straight with crooked lines. In other words, you may think your life's going nowhere. There might be lots of detours and lots of curveballs and lots of everything. But from God's perspective, you're going to end up right where you need to be. And this is a prime example of that. Okay? God writes straight with crooked lines. So you've got a Hebrew kid who may not even know he's a Hebrew kid growing up now in the palace. Verse 11. On one occasion, after Moses had grown up, when he visited his kinsmen and witnessed their forced labor, he saw an Egyptian striking a Hebrew, one of his own kinsmen. So at least by this time, he is aware, I'm not Egyptian. Okay, because it says he went to visit his own kinsmen, the Hebrews. Looking about and seeing no one, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. He kills the taskmaster and buries his body in a sand dune, basically. Okay? The next day he went out again, and now 2 Hebrews were fighting. So he asked the culprit, "Why are you striking your fellow Hebrew?" But the Hebrew replied, "Who has appointed you ruler and judge over us? Are you thinking of killing me just like you killed the Egyptian?" Upon hearing this, Moses became afraid and thought, the affair must certainly be known. In other words, he thought burying the guy in the sand was going to end the story, but he realizes, oh my God, people know about this. So he gets very frightened. Okay? Pharaoh too heard of the affair and sought to put Moses to death. But Moses fled from him and stayed in the land of Midian. As he was seated there by a well, 7 daughters of a priest of Midian came to draw water and fill the troughs to water their father's flock. But some shepherds came and drove them away. So Moses got up and defended them and watered their flock. When they returned to their father, Reuel, he said to them, "How is it you have returned so soon today?" They answered, "An Egyptian saved us from the interference of the shepherds. He even drew water for us and watered the flock." "Where is this man?" he asked his daughters. "Why did you leave him there? Invite him to have something to eat." So Moses agreed to live with him, and the man gave him his daughter Zipporah in marriage. She bore him a son, whom he named Gershom, for he said, "I am a stranger in a foreign land." Story actually moves pretty darn quick, doesn't it? Okay, you go from the birth of Moses, and we're only finishing up chapter 2, and he's already grown up, been part of Pharaoh's family, killed somebody, and run off, and gotten married, and had a kid. Wow, this is moving fast. It's also important to note out, and to point out, I should say, if you go back to verse 10, when the child grew, so when Moses grew, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her son and called him Moses, for she said, "I drew him out of the water." So what does the name Moses mean? You've been drawn from water. Okay? When Moses becomes a father years later, he names his son Gershom, for he said, "I am a stranger in a foreign land." In other words, you may not have a last name, because this is centuries and centuries before we had last names. That comes from the Middle Ages. But back in the biblical times especially, your name means something. Your name means something. Okay? And it might be even a very active thing, like being drawn from water, etc., etc. On my mom's side of the family, back in Germany, my family name means the people that make the beer. That's true. So your name means something, but that's the last name. Here it's the first name means something in this culture. Okay? And I'm not even a big beer drinker, but anyway. Here you go. Look at the title of that next one, The Burning Bush. Have you heard this story? You betcha. A long time passed, during which the king of Egypt died. Still the Israelites groaned and cried out because of their slavery, as their cry for release went up to God. God heard their groaning and was mindful of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. There's that trilogy I told you to watch for. We're going to hear that 1,000,000 times in the Hebrew Scriptures. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Where do you come from? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Who is your God? The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That will be the trilogy that we hear again and again and again. Okay, he saw the Israelites and he knew. Okay. Now, this is one of my favorite stories in Exodus for sure. Any questions so far? Slow me down and stop me if something's not clicking or you just catch something and you want to mention it. I told you I didn't want this to be just my voice. Anything so far? Okay, chapter 3. Meanwhile, Moses was tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro. So we've already heard about Jethro, right? He's the father that has all the daughters, but he hasn't been named thus far. Okay? So, meanwhile, Moses is tending the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian. Leading the flock across the desert, he came to Horeb, which is called the mountain of God. There an angel of the Lord appeared to him in fire flaming out of a bush. As Moses looked on, he was surprised to see that the bush, though on fire, was not being consumed. So Moses decided, I must go over to take a look at this remarkable sight, to see why the bush is not being burned. When the Lord saw Moses coming over to look at it more closely, God called out to him from the bush, Moses, Moses. That's my God voice. I won't do that very often, but with this story, you've got to. Okay? He, meaning Moses, answered, Here I am. God said, Come no nearer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. Okay, and then God continues. I am the God of your father, he continued, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. But the Lord said, I have witnessed the affliction of my people in Egypt, and have heard their cry of complaint against their slave drivers. So I know well what they are suffering. Therefore I have come down to rescue them from the hands of the Egyptians, and lead them out of that land into good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the country of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. Holy cats, how many ites have we got in this neighborhood? So indeed the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have truly noted that the Egyptians are oppressing them. Come now, I will send you to Pharaoh to lead my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Just going to check. What time is it?
It is 10 after.
Oh, so we've got like 20 minutes yet?
That's right.
Okay, I want to pause and just ask, because we've now shared almost 3 chapters. Do any of you have a translation where it's hard to follow because it's a little different from what I have and what I'm sharing out loud? Everything's pretty close?
Yeah.
I will tell you now, simply because I learned this a long time ago, the scriptures oftentimes, in my opinion, use too many pronouns, too many he's, his, hers, theirs, and so sometimes when we're reading, rather than saying his, I will say Moses. Or whether, and when we get to the Gospels, rather than just saying he, I will say Jesus. So don't be thrown by that. I'm just trying to help us, because of our humanness, work our way through. Because sometimes there's so many pronouns, you get to the end of the line, you go, what just, like, who just said that? How did that just happen? So don't be thrown by that. That's just my own little technique to kind of keep us focused on what the actual message is, okay? So if you're finding that you have a he, but I'm saying Moses, that's okay. If right now in this story, you have a he and I'm saying Jesus, tell me I'm way off base, okay? So, that's a few centuries, yeah. Okay, so, let's review what just happened here. Moses killed a slave driver, hid the body. When he realizes people know about it, including Pharaoh, he runs off. He gets married. He's starting a family. He's out tending the flock, so he's acting as a shepherd for his father-in-law. And God calls to him and says, guess what? I'm sending you back to Pharaoh. What would you think about this situation if that were you? You'd be scared. In other words, God, this may not be a good plan.
Are you sure?
Are you sure about this? I might not be. And that's exactly what we're going to read. He's basically going to say, I'm not sure I'm the right guy for this plan of yours. Okay? So it continues then. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and lead the Israelites out of Egypt? God answered, I will be with you, and this shall be your proof that it is I who have sent you. When you bring my people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this very mountain. But Moses said to God, when I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, if they ask me, what is his name, who am I to tell them? Okay, this section right ahead of us is one of the most confusing sections in all the scriptures. So I'm going to read it very slowly, and I'm probably going to read it twice, because it's very important for us, especially as Christians, when we get to the Gospels. But again, this is not how we speak. Okay? So, when I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, if they ask me, what is his name, What am I to tell them? God replied, I am who am. Then he added, this is what you shall tell the Israelites. I am sent me to you. So how is God identifying himself? I am. Okay? The deep theology of that title, if you will, is, from a historical perspective of reflection for centuries, God saying, I am, puts him in what tense?
First person.
God is always present. Not I was, not I will be. Whatever moment you find yourself in, I am. Okay? The reason why I'm drawing attention to this is when Jesus is on trial in front of Pilate, he will use that title. They say that you are the Son of God, and Jesus says simply, I am. Okay, so that title, which has its roots here in the early chapters of Exodus, will echo centuries later in the person of Christ, saying the same thing, I am. And to hear someone identify themselves at that throughout the history of Judaism would have gotten them stoned for blasphemy. Okay? Pam, question or thought?
No,
Okay.
sorry.
Other Pam, question or thought?
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, she has a large print Bible and I like it.
Oh, okay.
That was New American.
So your I am is very big then.
Yes.
Okay. God replied to Moses, I am who am. Then God added, this is what you shall tell the Israelites. I am sent me to you. God dared to speak further to Moses. Thus shall you say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever. This is my title for all generations. Thoughts, questions, confusion, pointers? The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is my name forever. Okay? How confusing Moses' life must have been.
I guess so.
Why are you nodding, Kathy? What's unique about this situation?
Well, just from the very beginning, the fact that he, is taken out of the water and he is in the hands of a whole different culture.
His own family.
And yet his family is raising him, and now he's in a whole different place and location, and he's marrying somebody from a whole different area. And
But keep in mind, too, even from a spiritual perspective, he would have had a very strange life. Because in his formative years, he would have been taught by his own Hebrew family. But once he got to the palace, as part of Pharaoh's family, what is he now immersed in? The pagan god structure, if you will, of the Egyptians. So part of this whole identifying who God is for Moses is so that there's no doubt about those other gods and goddesses that you've been hearing about since you were 13. That has nothing to do with me. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I am for all generations. So it's also clarifying to Moses, you can get rid of all that other stuff that you were raised with. I am the real God, if you will, the God of Israel. So Moses will continue. I love his attitude. So God is still continuing now. This is my name forever. This is my title for all generations. Go and assemble the elders of the Israelites and tell them, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me and said, I am concerned about you and about the way you are being treated in Egypt. So I have decided to lead you out of the misery of Egypt into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, a land flowing with milk and honey. Thus they will heed your message. Then you and the elders of Israel shall go to the king of Egypt and say to him, the Lord, the God of the Hebrews, has sent us word. Permit us then to go a 3 days' journey into the desert, that we may offer sacrifice to the Lord our God. Again, Moses hasn't spoken here for a little bit. This is all God's instructions to him in a sense. Verse 19. Yet I know that the king of Egypt will not allow you to go unless he is forced. So God is saying, I want you to do these things, but just so you know, it won't work. Why would God say that? Because he's God. Because he knows all of that already. Okay? Yet I know that the king of Egypt will not allow you to go unless he is forced. Therefore I will stretch out my hand and smite Egypt by doing all kinds of wondrous deeds there. After that, Pharaoh will send you away. I will even make the Egyptians so well disposed towards this people that when you leave, you will not go empty-handed. Every woman shall ask her neighbor and her house guest for silver and gold articles and for the clothing to put on your sons and daughters. Thus, you will despoil the Egyptians. Now, in a few chapters, when the Exodus actually happens, after all the plagues and everything, we'll have to think back to this to see if that happens. None telling you right now it will. Okay? Can we move on to chapter 4? Any questions? Confusion? Jump in? Okay. But, objected Moses, suppose they will not believe me, nor listen to my plea. For they may say, the Lord did not appear to you. The Lord therefore asked him, what is that in your hand? A staff, Moses answered. The Lord then said, throw it to the ground. When he threw it on the ground, the staff was changed into a serpent. And Moses shied away from it, as would most of us, I would think. If you got a walking stick and all of a sudden it's a snake, yeah, that would get your attention. And Moses shied away from it. Now put out your hand, the Lord said to him, and take hold of its tail. So Moses put out his hand and laid hold of it, and it became a staff again in his hand. This will take place so that they may believe, he continued, that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, did indeed appear to you. Again the Lord said to Moses, put your hand in your bosom. He put it in his bosom, and when he withdrew it, to his surprise, his hand was leprous, like snow. The Lord then said, now put your hand back in your bosom. Moses put his hand back in his bosom, and when he withdrew it, to his surprise, it was again like the rest of his body. If they will not believe you, nor heed the message of the first sign, they should believe the message of the second. And if they will not believe even these 2 signs, nor heed your plea, take some water from the river and pour it on the dry land. The water you take from the river will become blood on the dry land. So God is telling Moses 3 different signs that you can give, not to Pharaoh, but to whom? His own people. Because if he comes back to Egypt and seeks out the Hebrews and tells them the story, they're going to say, yeah, you're drinking. God didn't appear to you any more than he's appeared to me. So God is giving him ways to try to prove to the people, no, this message is real. This really happened. Okay? Moses is going to continue now. Moses, however, said to the Lord, if you please, Lord, I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor recently, nor now that you have spoken to me, your servant. But I am slow of speech and tongue. There is some suggestion with biblical scholars that perhaps he had a speech impediment, maybe a stutter or some kind of a situation. Moses does not speak well. Okay? So he protests. He says, Lord, I don't think I'm good for this. I don't speak all that well. Okay? I'm slow of speech and tongue. So the Lord said to him, who gives one man speech and makes another deaf and dumb? Or who gives sight to one and makes another blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Go then. It is I who will assist you in speaking and will teach you what you are to say. Yet Moses insisted, if you please, Lord, send someone else. Then the Lord became angry with Moses and said, Have you not your brother Aaron the Levite? I know that he is an eloquent speaker. Besides, he is now on his way to meet you. When he sees you, his heart will be glad. You are to speak to him then, and put the words in his mouth. And I will assist both you and him in speaking, and will teach the two of you what you are to do. He shall speak to the people for you. He shall be your spokesman, and you shall be as God to him. Take this staff in your hand, for with it you are to perform the signs. God has to get a little huffy before Moses finally says, okay. Sharon.
Never occurred to me before, but how come his brother Aaron survived? How come he wasn't killed too?
Probably got hid in a basket. I don't know. I mean, we don't have that detail. But yeah, he has a brother that also survived. Yeah. God's plan. If you remember nothing, is it 3:30?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Okay.
5 more minutes.
If you don't remember anything from today's time, remember God writes straight with crooked lines. Okay? Because that will be a lesson for us in the stories to come for sure. All right, we'll continue on a little bit more here. Don't want to short you of your, ticket price. The next part of chapter 4 in my Bible is entitled Moses Returned to Egypt. After all of this, Moses returned to his father-in-law Jethro and said to him, "Let me go back, please, to my kinsmen in Egypt to see whether they are still living." Jethro replied, "Go in peace." So in other words, what does Moses have to do? He has to go to his wife's family, because that's been his new life, and say, I have to go back. Imagine what that must have been like for his wife, for his children, or child at least at this point, and even for his father-in-law. Like, what are you crazy? Why would you want to go back? You've got a good life with us. I know we're just shepherd people, but still, at least you don't have to worry about being put to death. It's interesting that it kind of ignores some of that and says he just said, go in peace. Maybe he didn't like his son-in-law. I don't know. But Jethro says, go in peace. In Midian, the Lord said to Moses, go back to Egypt, for all the men who sought your life are dead. So Moses took his wife and his sons, I thought there was more than one, and started back to the land of Egypt, with them riding the ass, or donkey, mule, whatever you might have. The staff of God he carried with him. The Lord said to him, on your return to Egypt, see that you perform before Pharaoh all the wonders I have put into your power. I will make him obstinate, however, so that he will not let the people go. So you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my son, my firstborn. Hence I tell you, let my son go, that he may serve me. If you refuse to let him go, I warn you, I will kill your son, your firstborn. On the journey at a place where they spent the night, the Lord came upon Moses and would have killed him. But Zipporah took a piece of flint and cut off her son's foreskin. And touching his person, she said, you are a spouse of blood to me. Then God let Moses go. At that time she said, a spouse of blood in regard to the circumcision. This is a very bizarre little part of the story. Because everything is happening rather quickly, and Moses has even gone to his father-in-law and got permission to leave the family and go back to Egypt. And then on the way, God is going to get rid of Moses. Okay? So, part of the explanation of this is, what does Zipporah, the wife of Moses, do to appease the Lord? Why, perhaps, is the Lord angry with Moses? Those sons should have been circumcised when they were first born. In other words, he has not kept up the law. So Zipporah, a foreign woman, knows enough about the history of the Hebrew story to quickly circumcise her son and basically say to the Lord, there, it's done. Leave him alone. But it's a very strange little aside from this. But yes, if Moses were being a faithful person of the Hebrew tradition, those sons would have been circumcised when they were first born, 40 days old,
Yeah,
basically.
but he really wasn't a faithful Hebrew. He moved into another country and.
Your faith is supposed to go with you no matter where you are. As we're going to hear again and again and again.
But wouldn't
Okay.
God already know this, that the
Yeah.
boys weren't circumcised at the bush?
Does God know all things?
Yes.
Then you've answered your own question.
It was just like, aha, I just remembered.
Yeah, one more thing, Moses. Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's the best we can do with it. It's a very strange little aside.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden the story's coming together. He's heading back, and all of a sudden, whoa! What's going on in the middle of the night here? Okay? On the journey, at a place where they spent the night, the Lord came upon Moses and would have killed him. But Zipporah took a piece of flint, cut off her son's foreskin, and touching him in person, she said, "You are a spouse of blood to me." Then God let Moses go. At that time she said, "A spouse of blood in regard to the circumcision." So again, part of the law formally will be about circumcision. Okay? I think that's a good place to leave it for today.
Okay.
We'll send them even further into the desert next time. Any questions before we go? You're just glad we're actually reading the Bible for a change. I know. Okay, cool. There's a lot there.
Stand it too.
There's a lot there. Look at you, you Catholic school student, you. You've got your Bible covered in a grocery bag. That's so awesome. I haven't done that since I was in 6th grade. It's a universal book cover for Catholic school kids. I love that. That's great. No, they're plastic. All right, thanks everybody. If you're confused, come back at 6:30. We'll do it again.